British produce being imported into the US will be hit by a 10% tariff from the 5th of April.
The EU, on the other hand, is going to receive a 20% tariff.
United Kingdom 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. You know, you think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half.
Well, the Prime Minister hit back this morning, assuring business chiefs that the government would respond with cool and calm heads, but acknowledging the economic impact.
Yes, well, shall we head back to Downing Street and join our political editor, Christopher Hope, with the very latest. Christopher, so behind the scenes, where do you think the government is going on this one? Obviously, they'll be very concerned about the potential economic impact, particularly on certain industries. Where do you think they're going to go?
I think we can't say right now, frankly, Emily. I think they are just doing a keep calm and carry on approach to dealing with this. We're hearing the same language from the European Union. There's a consultation being launched asking companies to pitch in how would you deal with 10% tariffs on your business. And of course, car makers are a different case altogether, 25% on exports to America. See where that takes them. They hold the right to have to take action while that consultation is going on. That comes back on May the 1st, and after that there might be some more action. But we'll wait and see. I think they aren't really sure. They're trying to calibrate a reaction to avoid inflaming relations with Donald Trump and to understand where does that 10% come from. In the lobby briefing earlier, we asked, do you recognise this 10% tariff on US goods? Is that a number you recognise? Because we understand that the business department thinks it might be more like 4%. So where does 10% come from? The idea of US goods being given a 10% tariff, well, frankly, wasn't discussed in politics until last night when it was raised by the USA. So it might well be that we're trying to say to America, you know, where is that 10% come from? Is that half VAT? And VAT is a national sales tax. You have local sales taxes in America. The EU has sales taxes. Is that what you're talking about? Or are there elements of how do you get to 10%? That isn't really very clear, I think, for the UK government. And they wouldn't say in the briefing just now whether they supported it or not. Jonathan Reynolds is leading the way. He's the business secretary, and you saw Keir Starmer earlier. But worried faces, concerned faces, because according to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, a 10% tariff applied across the UK for the next 2 years will wipe out all of the 0.5% growth we heard from the Treasury last week. So big concerns here.
Yeah, and there's been a bit of a debate, hasn't there, over whether the fact we have been given only 10% in tariffs, the lowest of any country, although there are other countries with 10% as well, that this is a win for the Labour government, that this is down to various negotiations that have been ongoing, and it's a Labour win. Others have said it absolutely isn't.
Yes, you could say that. You could also say it's a Brexit dividend. And if I asked that question in Downing Street just now, and they refused to go back and relitigate the Brexit battles from 9 years ago. But yeah, that's what it looks like. It's an advantage of being outside the European Union. And I've long wondered why the building behind me doesn't just embrace the status of being outside the European Union, own the sovereignty, own the right and the fact that the decisions are made now by elected politicians, not by officials in Brussels. And that's why Brexit matters for so much. It empowers anyone in power in this country to do more than they could do when they're hiding behind the EU's apron strings. I've got to also, by the way, while I'm on, talk to you briefly about Birmingham. Fascinating, I think, that now we've got a minister in Angela Rayner's department going to Birmingham to bang heads together. They want an immediate solution to the issue of the bin crisis in Birmingham, the rats. It is horrific what's happening there. Were that to be in London, imagine that the outcry and anger, frankly, from the Westminster elite, the Whitehall machine. Because in Birmingham, it's kind of forgotten. That is outrageous, and that's why we're covering it so much on GB News. Jim McMullen, who's a junior minister in Angela Rayner's department, he is now meeting with senior figures today. Of course, overnight, we've seen Unite's leader, Sharon Graham. She has written to Angela Rayner, who's the local government secretary, to call for action.
Yeah, and it's all been going on since the 11th of March. One could say, why has it taken so long for Angela Rayner to get involved? But Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed for now.
Well, what do these tariffs mean for us here in the UK? And what do you make of it at home? Let's cross to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, who's been asking that exact question. Tony.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, a sunny day here in Glasgow and a sunny outlook is something that people, the optimists of certainly Scotland, are hoping for. Of course, big concerns across many of our industries, including Scottish salmon and our Scotch whisky. But across the UK, there's a bigger conversation about these tariffs. The who, what, where and when and why is certainly filling up a lot of people's minds as to just how much they're going to be hit by these tariffs on imports into the United States. And we've heard here from people in Glasgow the general confusion over why these are coming in and just how far the effects of them will be felt in day-to-day lives. But across the country, the concerns are certainly echoed elsewhere in the UK. And our good friend Anna Riley has been speaking to people in Yorkshire today about their concerns and what these tariffs will mean for them.
What is confusing me about this tariff is they're saying it's a blanket ban of 10%, which I understand, and then they suddenly say, but for cars it's 25%. So it's not a blanket ban. And that's what is confusing for me.
So would you say you understood what a tariff was? How would you describe one?
Something they're putting on to things, and hopefully it's not going to hurt normal people, just working class people.
And would you know what it meant by a reciprocal tariff?
Yes, well, I should think that means we do the same sort of thing.
And if you could ask an expert a bit more about these tariffs and how they work, what would you ask them?
Are they necessary? Or what is the reason for doing it?
I think that what he's done is to try to change the status quo globally. I think for too long and America particularly, and us, and Europe, have been bombarded with a lot of cheap imports from China, which has affected our manufacturing. So we're not manufacturing like we used to. And I think this is Trump's aim. Whether it works or not, we'll wait and see.
There you go. A lot of people are certainly keen to talk to experts about what this will mean to them. And if I could make my own submission, what will the long-term effects be on our Scottish industry of our whisky, our beloved Scotch whisky industry? That is the big question up here at the very least.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the areas that's probably going to be hit the most, actually. Tony Maguire, thank you very much from a very sunny and bustling Glasgow. I can see behind you. Shall we speak to the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, Mike Tapp, on all of this? Mike, what do you reckon? 10% tariffs for us, 20% for the European Union. Have we seen a benefit there from being outside the European Union?
I think it's, any tariff isn't ideal, and we've made that really clear. But I think the statesman-like approach that we've seen from the Prime Minister in his dealings with the American administration and that historic special relationship that we have with the United States has certainly been of assistance. But of course, we're in the middle of trade talks now, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver.
Mike, you didn't really answer my question. Mike, you didn't answer my question. Is this a Brexit dividend? What do you think your constituents would say?
I don't know if it's a Brexit dividend. It wasn't on the side of the bus. But look, I'm not particularly fussed by that. Brexit's long gone, and it's about making sure we've got relationships with Europe and with the United States, which we'll continue to pursue.
So, looking at this trade negotiation that is ongoing, what does the government actually want to achieve out of it? I mean, Donald Trump said yesterday that there is now a baseline 10% tariff. Are we going to break that baseline? Are we actually going to return to a situation where some of our industries, much of the pharmaceuticals industry, for example, that enjoyed zero tariffs with the United States until yesterday's announcement, are we going to return to that status quo ante, or is it going to be somewhere in between?
I'd imagine that the aim of the government is to see those tariffs go. Whether that's achievable or not is difficult to say. And look, what we won't see from the government over the coming weeks and months is a sort of running commentary of those negotiations, because it is a delicate process and it's diplomacy, really. And we've seen how competent this government is on the diplomatic front. So I'm confident that we'll deliver what's in the national interest.
Mike, have we seen actually how competent this government is on the diplomacy front? Because I've been looking at the formula that the administration in the United States have used to calculate the tariffs they charge on other countries. And it seems that, well, potentially we just fit along that formula, that there's been no great negotiation achieving this 10% tariff. We've got this 10% tariff because we don't have a big trade deficit with the United States. It seems what they've done in order to calculate their tariffs is take a trade deficit in goods, divide that by the country's exports to the United States, turn that into a percentage and halve it. That's how they've turned up with these this 20% for the European Union and higher for China and all the rest of it. I mean, has there really been any negotiation that's actually affected their thinking?
It's difficult to say, having not been party to the negotiations, but we've got to look at the fact that it is the lowest tariff across the world, and that is good and that is encouraging. But of course, you know, we don't want to see these tariffs, and I have faith in Keir Starmer and this government to work hard in the national interest to get that deal that will benefit us here.
Yeah, it's not great that we're on the same track as Afghanistan and Chile and Peru. But, Mike, I want to turn our attention to something else. Why has it taken so long for Angela Rayner to get involved with what's happening in Birmingham with all of these bins? The union representing these bin workers has been on strike now since March the 11th, so that's a number of weeks now. And it's just getting pretty grim for people in our second biggest city. Why is she only getting involved now?
Yeah, I mean, look, Birmingham's a long way from Dover, so my knowledge
of the ins... You must care, though, Mike. I care.
Of course I care. But the ins and outs of the council functions are beyond my knowledge. But it is good to see that the government and ministers are stepping in to ensure that that is cleared, because it does need to be cleared.
Shall we return to trade for a second then? Because one of the first actions of this government was to fire the previous government's trade negotiator, chief trade negotiator, Crawford Faulkner. He had been conducting a huge amount of these negotiations with the previous Trump regime. He knew the ins and outs of the trade relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. Could getting rid of him have been a mistake, given these negotiations need to start from scratch almost? These relationships need to be rebuilt from scratch?
No, I don't think so. Look, the important thing is that we've got competent diplomats working in this area. And of course, we've got Mr. Mandelson out in the United States as well, who you may not like, but he is a very competent politician. And look, Keir Starmer is leading as a statesman on the global stage. And we're accepting what Donald Trump is saying, for example, around Europe relying on the United States too much for defence. We've raised our defence spending 2.5%, things that Donald Trump was calling for before he was president, that were ignored by the previous administration and that we have put into play. So there is that respect there and that deep relationship, which is historic with Mr. Trump. Of course, he's going to be over on a state visit in due course too. So I'm confident that with the relationship we've built and the competent diplomats that are working on this, we will deliver. But unfortunately for news, there won't be that running commentary, because there is a skill to diplomacy and negotiations that actually your cards need to be kept quite close to your chest.
Yes, Mandelson is learning it quite quickly, isn't he? Did an about turn on his view on Donald Trump, didn't he? Mike Tapp, thank you very much indeed, Labour MP for Dover and Deal.